Hey there, Glenn with the Toy Temple, and today we're taking a look at the Marvel Studios first 10 years. Marvel Studios Iron Man, Tony Stark and Iron Man Mark 1 2-pack from the Marvel Legends series. I just recently reviewed Iron Man for a future video, and I like it a lot more than what I thought. Thinking back on it, I'm very nostalgic for it. Tony Stark building this out of a box of scraps, seriously impressive. Right here it gives a rundown of each figure in the box. Tony Stark, the heir of Stark Industries. Tony Stark does not realize the impact of his weapons of war until he is kidnapped and forced to build one or die. And additionally, the Iron Man Mark 1 rundown is Tony Stark creates a suit out of weapons materials and escapes from confinement in a clanking suit of metal, later known as Mark 1. And it gives you a poster of the original movie that came out in 2008. And here is the Mark 1 and Tony Stark out of the package. And, you know, the size comparison usually comes later in these, but I feel like the Mark 1 was a little bigger than this. I mean, yeah, it's about the same size as Tony, but Tony's head is larger than what can fit inside this Mark 1. Look at that. That's just, I don't like that. Taking a look at the figures individually, Tony Stark looks just like Robert Downey Jr. And that's a great head sculpt because there's not too many Tony Stark action figures out there. So it's nice that we actually got him. So size-wise, he's a little undersized, but let's see. Which one should we do first? Let's do Tony Stark. So taking a look at Tony Stark, and you know, a few things about this. Number one, I wish he had sunglasses. You know, in the first scene in Iron Man when the truck gets blown up, spoilers for a 11-year-old movie now, he had sunglasses on because he was in the desert, and I don't know, it would have been cool to have some accessory sunglasses. This is a very great head sculpt, and with this head swap, you can take off Tony Stark, take off the Iron Man Mark 7, and I don't know, does it work? Does it work for you? It sort of works for me, but I feel like the head's maybe a little too tiny for this. Articulation wise, he's got double jointed elbows, shoulders that go 360, bicep swivel, hands will go 360, and there's even a hinge on there. His tie is slightly articulated. Look at it go. Same thing on this arm. Like I mentioned before, ball and socket for the head, and it can go left or right, you know, crank it around. He does have thigh swivel, motion up there with the hip. He does have double jointed knees, ankle pivot, and ankle rockers. So let's take a look at the Mark 1 right now. Well, that was a fun transition. So we've got the Mark 1 here, and it looks pretty intimidating until you get to the size. And the size is where I think this needs to be a little bit bigger. And if I had to pick, I wouldn't have released the Mark 1. And I know that they did it because they've already put this out. Yeah, that's a re-release. It's got better paint, but it is a re-release. This is definitely one of those cheaper sets that they've done. And I didn't have it, so I was happy to buy it. But unfortunately, it's just it's a re-release. I would have much preferred the Ironmonger, you know, the Jeff Daniels character. Accessory-wise, I showed you at the start of the video. It's got this little shooty explosion effect, which, you know, it's a little gimmicky. Not needed. Ugh. Paint-wise, on the Mark 1, you know, it's got some nice rust spots. You know, there's a barcode right there. Oxygen tank is painted, but then it's got like these little scratches on there. I think that's pretty neat. The wiring has some rust to it. The back, you know, it looks dirty, it looks dingy, and that's kind of the box of scraps look that we're looking for when it comes to the Mark 1. It's got 360 shoulders, tight single jointed elbows, and it's tight because the elbows barely work on this thing. Look at that. It gets in its own way. The hand is molded onto that forearm, so you can't really get any hand rotation. The head does not go 360, and in fact, I think I just damaged it a little trying to do it. Oh well. Battle scars, right? They do have a hinge on that shoulder so that they can go up and down. Same thing with the leg, hinge right there. You can get some kicking action both ways right there. Single jointed knees, and no ankle rockers, but ankle pivot. And up here you've got some waist range, but it refuses to go all the way around because the back piece right here starts to restrict you just a little bit, and it just kind of gets annoying. Boy, it doesn't take long for Tony Stark to really make some giant improvements on his work, does it? This is the Mark 1, and this is the Mark 7, and height-wise, it seems like Tony had a growth spurt because this is just so undersized. It's gonna go in the Hall of Armor, but goodness, looking at this compared to that, it's night and day. And then you get all three together, Tony Stark, the Mark 1, and the Mark 7, and yeah, the Mark 7 is just the better figure. So now comes the hard part. I have to give this a score, and this might be my lowest Marvel Legends score I've ever given. The re-release of something from the Iron Man 3 movies that doesn't even scale very well. The Marvel 10 Years line, it's the opportunity to release those never before released figures, and this is just two molds that have been seen before, re-released. It's disappointing. This had a $50 price tag on it, and if you paid that, goodness, I feel for you. I really do. 1 out of 5. This is big time disappointing. The only reason it gets a 1 is because of that beautiful, beautiful Tony Stark face print. You can't get that anywhere else. Tony, unfortunately, you brought the wrong box of scraps with you. This is the worst. You deserve better. The suit, come on. It's no accessories. This is bad. Leave it on the shelf. Leave it in the cave. Didn't deserve to come home with you. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Take a look at our Instagram and Twitter, both at The Toy Temple. Hit like, share, subscribe. Tell us down below if I'm wrong. You probably think I'm wrong, but tell me. And remember, you're never too old to enjoy the things you love. You can't even stand. Come on.